Air India Express Flight 812 is on its final approach to runway 24 at Mangalore Airport. The plane is unstable. It's flying in at a dangerous 9-degree angle and with excessive speed. At the end of the runway is a 200-foot cliff. The runway is short and there is no margin for error. But at this speed, they won't be able to stop and they might fall into the cliff.
Go around, Captain. Please go around.
But the captain doesn't respond. The clock is ticking. They need to go around now, but they don't. The plane continues hurtling towards the runway. What happens next? Let's find out. This is the story of Air India Express 812.
Wyngx.
It's 10 p.m. at Dubai International Airport. Air India Express Flight 812 is being prepared for its next flight. Passengers are boarding, luggage is being loaded, the plane is being refueled. In the cockpit, the captain and the first officer settle into their seats. It's supposed to be a simple 3-hour hop to Mangalore. The captain has flown into this airport 16 times before, and the first officer has done this 66 times. But tonight, something feels off. The captain stifles a yawn, signals to the stewardess.
Can I get a coffee, please?
He is just back from a 2-week break in Serbia, only returning 2 days ago. And his body clock is completely out of sync. The time zones are still messing with his sleep. And he wasn't even supposed to be flying tonight. It was a last-minute change. Air India Express had called him the previous day and had asked him to switch for a colleague.
Okay, I'll do it.
In 2010, Air India Express handled scheduling manually, with pen and paper. And these last-minute changes were part of the routine. But these last-minute changes took a toll on the pilots. Sometimes they were fatigued, and their judgment was blurred. If they had a platform like Odoo, things could have looked very different. Odoo is a simple, efficient and affordable platform that covers all your business needs, from scheduling to project management, inventory and websites. You can start with just the apps you need and add more as you grow. With the Odoo project application, you get a flexible solution to keep you and your team organized and on top of every detail. Through this comprehensive dashboard, you will have a complete view of projects with customizable stages and real-time updates. Use the Kanban view to move tasks like sticky notes for a visual pipeline, the Gantt view to see timelines, task dependencies and schedules, and the list view for an organized overview with batch action capabilities. You can even save and share custom views, giving everyone the information they need in just one click. For seamless collaboration, Odoo centralizes communication by using the chatter within the tasks, allowing you to email, add quick notes, or attach files directly to tasks through log nodes, all in one place. With Odoo, your first app is free for life, including unlimited hosting and support. It's a powerful way to manage complex operations, keeping your team organized so that nothing critical slips through the cracks. This story begins on the night of May 21st, 2010 at Mangalore International Airport. Here's the plan for tonight. Take off from Mangalore at 9:35 p.m, land in Dubai at 1 a.m, take off from Dubai again at 2:45 a.m, and return to Mangalore by 6:30 a.m. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. A flight so routine you could do it with your eyes closed. The captain is Latko Glušića, a 55-year-old Serbian national. He is one of a handful of foreign pilots rostered by Air India Express. Next to him in the cockpit is 40-year-old Mumbaikar Harbinder Ahluwalia. In the back with the passengers were 4 other cabin crew members, but they won't play a part in the story today. The aircraft is a Boeing 737-800, equipped with a short-field performance package, allowing it to operate from airports with short runways, like the one here at Mangalore. The plane is just under 3 years old and it was delivered to Air India Express in January of 2008. Tonight's flights are going to happen late in the night, and most of it will occur in the window of circadian low, the hours between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. where fatigue peaks and concentration dips. Air India Express typically conducts pre-flight medical checks for all pilots as required by DGCA, the Indian Aviation Authorities. However, there is a problem at Mangalore tonight. Air India Express does not have a medical officer on staff or on contract at Mangalore Airport, meaning no pre-flight medical exams are conducted for flights departing from Mangalore. While DGCA rules mandate medical checks for flight crews, the specific requirements are ambiguous and they are often interpreted differently by airlines. In this case, the pilots are asked to just self-certify their fitness to fly and no actual medical tests are performed. The plane then departs Mangalore on time and the outbound flight to Dubai proceeds uneventfully. Upon landing in Dubai, the crew spends about 1 hour and 22 minutes preparing for the return flight. Because this is a quick turnaround flight, there are no requirements for a pre-flight medical check in Dubai. The assumption is that the pilots have already been cleared at Mangalore. But today, that assumption is dangerously flawed. And now, as they prepare to take off for the return leg, the question looms. Are they truly fit to fly? The plane is now ready for takeoff on the runway in Dubai. The throttle is pushed forward, the engines roar to life, and the plane lifts off into the night. It is headed for Mangalore. On short flights like this, relief crews are usually not needed. The same 2 pilots will fly the plane for the entire 3.5-hour journey. But about an hour into this flight, fatigue begins to set in for the captain. The time zone in Serbia, where he had been holidaying, is GMT +2, meaning his body clock is 3.5 hours behind. Combined with the disruption to his sleep cycle from constant travel, the captain starts feeling the effects. He leans back in his seat and closes his eyes. And within moments, he drifts off into a deep sleep. And the sound of snoring fills the cockpit. Now, there's just one functioning pilot left. First Officer Ahluwalia is left to handle both ATC communications and flying the plane single-handedly. A job that's meant for 2, now being done by 1. But if there is any airport where every ounce of focus, precision, and teamwork is crucial, it's Mangalore. Here's why. Mangalore Airport is non-standard in many ways. First, it sits on top of a small hill and it has what's called a tabletop runway. A runway that is surrounded by steep cliffs on all sides. The runway is also narrower. It is just 150 meters wide as opposed to the standard 300 meters. Adding to the challenge, the runway end safety area isn't well maintained and has overgrown with plants. And to make things worse, the end of runway 24 plunges into a 250-foot drop. An aircraft overshooting here doesn't just risk a runway overrun, but it faces the terrifying possibility of a catastrophic fall off the edge of a cliff. And as if that wasn't enough, the Mangalore area control radar isn't working. Normally, the area controller would provide descent clearance before handing the aircraft off to the approach controller. But without it, things are about to get messy. Given Mangalore's complexity, Air India Express had classified the airport as a critical airport, meaning only the captain can land here, while the first officer is limited to pilot monitoring. This too will play a part in the story. With a difficult approach, a cliffside runway, and radar down, Mangalore demands a flight crew that is on top of their game, working together. But in the cockpit of Flight 812, the first officer is performing double duty and the captain is fast asleep. It's now 5:33 in the morning. The aircraft is at the waypoint Igama. ATC instructs the crew to prepare for an ILS DME arc approach into runway 24. Alright, so what's a DME arc approach? During a standard ILS approach, an aircraft aligns with the runway centerline and descends along the glide slope in a straight line towards the runway. However, when obstacles like hills, mountains, or restricted airspaces are present near the airport, a straight-in approach might not be possible. In these cases, the aircraft may follow a circular DME approach at a fixed distance from the airport. The aircraft follows this arc until it can safely intercept the localizer to align with the runway. This method ensures the aircraft avoids hazards while still guiding it towards a safe landing. Here in Mangalore, the Kudremukh Hills are just to the east of Mangalore Airport, and in order to avoid it, an arc approach is necessary for runway 24. The DME arc approach demands more concentration and skill from the pilot. It's not inherently difficult. Pilots are trained and they regularly perform these procedures. But it requires careful attention to detail. This is a good time for me to remind you that the captain is still sleeping and the first officer is doing double duty. Approximately 130 miles from Mangalore, the first officer requests descent clearance. This is where the plane would normally start descending from. But today, ATC denies this request. Remember that the Mangalore area control radar is not working. Without radar, ATC resorts to a manual system called Standard Procedure Control. They form a mental map of where the planes are, and to ensure safety, they keep the planes separated further apart than usual, normally 10 to 15 minutes of flying time, to make extra sure that they stay safe. When a plane needs to change altitude, ATC has to make sure that there is enough space both at the new altitude and at all altitudes that they will cross while descending. Because of this, they prefer to keep planes at the same altitude for as long as possible. For this approach, the ATC decided that the right time for the plane to start descending is when they are 80 miles away. The plane now reaches the 80 miles mark and they are cleared for the descent. The first officer taps the controls, initiating the descent to 7,000 feet. The flight crew is trained to descend from such short distances. They know the plan. If they remain too high, they must enter a holding pattern to lose altitude. But the planning for this is done during an approach briefing. And this approach briefing, according to Air India Express, needs to be done at 150 miles from the airport. But with the captain deeply asleep, the briefing window is missed. The first officer glances over, sees the captain slumped in his seat, and gently nudges him awake. His voice cuts through the quiet cockpit.
Captain, we are approaching.
The captain wakes up, slowly, groggy, and disoriented. Remember, only the captain is allowed to land at Mangalore. The descent has already begun, and there is no time to go through a full briefing, so they decide to skip the approach briefing. The captain then takes his first of many actions today. He initiates the speed brakes, trying to lose speed and quicken the descent as the runway draws nearer. The plane is now 25 miles away and at 18,000 feet. Since they began their descent later than usual, they are much higher than where they should be at this stage. ATC clears them down to 2,900 feet. The first officer requests a shorter approach, asking to proceed directly to the 338 radial and join the 10 DME arc. The ATC approves it. But given that they are already much higher than their ideal descent path, it's puzzling why the first officer would want a shorter route, since a longer distance could have allowed them to descend more smoothly. By now, the pilots have been on duty for nearly 10 hours, pushing through the window of circadian low. Throughout this phase, Captain Glusika remains mostly silent, occasionally yawning or exhaling. But worryingly, the first officer starts yawning too. Fatigue is setting in on both sides of the cockpit. They are ready to land, go home, and get some well-deserved rest. The plane reaches the entry point to the 10 DME arc. At this point, they should have been at 2,900 feet. But they are at 10,500 feet. They start following the circular path. By the time they arrive at this position, ready to make the right turn, they should be at 2,200 feet. But they are not able to. They arrive at this place at an extreme altitude of 6,000 feet. The captain scans his instruments, realizes that they are way too high. To lose speed and altitude, he lowers the landing gear and deploys the speed brakes to the full setting. But despite his efforts, the plane continues to remain too high. And at this height, they won't be able to capture the glide slope at all. The glide slope will be under them. Yet, strangely, just 2 minutes later, the glide slope turns pink and the plane latches on to the localizer and begins descending towards the runway. But wait, how did that happen? What has happened is that they have captured the phantom 9-degree glide slope instead of the correct 3-degree glide slope. and this has caused the plane to start descending at a terrifying 9-degree angle, almost 3 times the normal. For an alert pilot, the steep angle should have been a clear sign that they were on the wrong path. But this crew completely misses the clues. For a more detailed explanation of the 9-degree glide slope, please watch the story of Pakistan Airways 8303. The steep angle of approach is causing the plane to speed up. At 10 miles from the runway, the captain instructs the first officer,
Give me flaps 10.
in an attempt to reduce speed, but they are flying way too fast for flaps 10. The first officer hesitates, and he questions the captain.
Are you sure? Flaps 10?
Captain says yes, and the first officer sets flaps 10. At 7.5 miles, the plane should be at 2,000 feet, but they are at 5,000 feet. At 4 miles, they should be at 1,500 feet, but they are at 3,200 feet, more than twice the altitude that they should be at. The plane continues to descend at a crazy rate. At this point, the crew should have recognized that they are too high and they should have initiated a holding pattern to reduce altitude. This would have been a part of the approach checklist which they failed to perform. 3 miles from the airport, flaps 40 is selected, and before landing checklist is completed. They should have been at 1,200 feet, but they are at 2,800 feet. The plane's descent rate has increased from 1,000 feet per minute to 2,000 feet per minute. The first officer identifies that they are not stabilized.
We're too high, Captain. Runway is straight down.
But they continue with the approach.
Pull up. Pull up.
2 miles from the airport, the captain disconnects the autopilot and takes manual control. At this point, they should have gone around. The approach is entirely unstable, and with the speed at which they are approaching, they run the risk of not being able to stop the plane in time, given how short the runway is. 1.5 miles away. It's only now that the captain has realized that they have captured the 9-degree glide slope and not the 3-degree glide slope.
Wrong localizer. Glide path.
The cockpit fills with warnings. Sink rate, pull up, repeated over and over. The captain ignores them,
Oh my god.
but still he pushes forward, fixated on landing. A worried first officer suggests once again,
Captain, go around. We're unstable.
but no. The captain disagrees and overrides the first officer, and the first officer doesn't take control because he is not allowed to land in Mangalore. 1 mile away. The runway is in sight now. They are still too high, too fast. The captain leans into the descent, pushing the column forward. The plane dives, now dropping at a harrowing 4,000 feet per minute, incredibly close to the ground. Alarms fill the cockpit. The ground proximity warning system is screaming. Automated calls one after the other. Last-ditch pleas to act. But neither pilot acknowledges them. They press forward, not properly aligned with the ILS path. The captain is stuck in a psychological trap known as plan continuation bias. The urge to stick to a plan even when everything screams otherwise. Despite every signal, he's committed, locked into the landing. The runway lights grow larger. In the tower, ATC radios in, sensing that something is wrong.
Express 812. Can you confirm established?
Instead of reporting accurately, the captain instructs the first officer to respond with affirmative. With the confirmation, the tower grants clearance and advises,
Express 812. Clear to land. Winds calm.
even as they are given landing clearance, the plane is still descending at 4,000 feet per minute. They are at 700 feet as opposed to the standard 300 feet where they should be at. Alarms continue ringing in the cockpit. The plane crosses the runway threshold at 200 feet at a blistering 160 knots, well above the target speed of 144 knots. The plane floats past the touchdown zone, burning up precious distance on the short tabletop runway. The first officer makes a final desperate plea,
Go around, Captain. We don't have runway left.
but the captain doesn't pull up. First contact. The right wheel hits the runway, 4,500 feet from the start. The plane bounces, then settles again at 5,200 feet. More than half the runway is gone. The situation is dire. They have just 2,800 feet left to stop. The captain's grip tightens on the controls, eyes fixed on the end of the runway. 10 seconds left. Just 10. The cliff's edge is closing in, with no room for error. The auto brake is set to 2. It should have been set to max for maximum braking. The captain deploys the reverse thrusters and slams on the brakes. The engines engage the reversers, but the plane is still hurtling down the runway. Too fast for comfort. Too close to the edge. With the runway edge rapidly approaching, the captain makes a split-second decision. He stops the reversers and tries a last-ditch attempt to go around. He pushes the throttles forward and the engines surge. But it takes a fraction of a second to spool back up to speed. Seconds that they don't have. And it's too late. They are not going fast enough to take off, and they are not going slow enough to stop safely. The last-minute extra thrust from the engines cancels what little braking power they had left. The cliff's edge is seconds away. The plane barrels forward, and time slows. The plane enters the poorly maintained racer. The right wing smashes into the ILS antenna. "Hold on," someone shouts. The plane smashes through the boundary fence. A final jolt. The Boeing 737 leaves solid ground. The cliff drops away, and gravity takes hold. The plane falls down. Impact. The plane shatters in the gorge, torn apart by the force. Fuel tanks rupture. Flames explode. Smoke fills the air. Debris is scattered across the ravine. And the plane splits into 3 sections. The plane has come to a rest about half a kilometer from the boundary fence. And due to the impact and the fire, the plane is entirely destroyed. Emergency services are scrambled, but the terrain is brutal and they are remote. Minutes tick by. Local villagers drawn by the crash arrive at the scene. They become the first responders. With no equipment, no training, and just sheer determination, they sift through the wreckage, pulling survivors out. Their actions save precious time before official crews arrive. But it's a sad scene. Out of 166 souls, only 8 survive. In the aftermath, investigators begin unraveling the catastrophe. They piece together data, listen to the cockpit voice recordings, and they discover a haunting truth. If the captain had applied full brakes and held reverse thrust, the plane might have stopped within the overrun. But his last-second choice to attempt a go-around, a move that the rules prohibited, sealed the fate of Flight 812. Throttles forward, brakes released, just when they needed them the most. A plane is on fire.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
The captain has just heard a deafening bang from the cargo hold. There is smoke seeping into the cockpit. Alarms are blaring. Instruments are failing. They are losing control of the plane. The ATC is on the line, helpless.
Is it in the back?
But behind the scenes, something far more dangerous is unfolding. A chain of events that will spark decades of speculation, government cover-ups, conflicting reports, and whispers of something far more sinister.